Well, I'm so excited that everyone is here tonight. We've been working on this for a few months, so we're really excited to be able to launch this first quarterly webinar for state chapters. So if anyone doesn't know me, I'm Michelle Martinez. I'm going to kind of be your facilitator this evening. We also have Adam Porth. He's going to be the moderator tonight, looking through the chat, answering questions, and also noting questions for the end. And also Jacques DeMoss, he's our U.S. Chess liaison. He's providing all the technical support tonight. He also was like super instrumental in helping us make this webinar possible. So before we dive in, I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here, for participating, and thank you for everything that you do to support your states, your state chapters, your committees. Everything that you all do to support your states helps strengthen chess all across the country. So it's really amazing that you're here and can't wait to learn more from our speakers tonight. So a few quick notes before we get started. Like I said, we're going to record the session. We are going to post it on the US Chess website. So our hope is to have kind of like our own little corner, the States and Affiliates corner on the US Chess website, where we'll have all these resources. While our speakers are speaking, please keep your microphones muted. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So you can drop questions in the chat anytime. Adam's going to keep note of those. And also at the end, you'll also be able to unmute and raise your hand and ask questions too. So before we begin with tonight's topic, I just wanted to kind of talk about the States and Affiliates Committee, also known as SAC, in case anybody isn't familiar with the committee. Basically, what SAC does is advise the executive board on any kind of matter related to state chapters and affiliates, helps with state chapters and affiliates with their roles and responsibilities, also supports education and best practices. So the webinar series that we're kind of developing here is part of that mission. So what the committee wants to kind of have is an arm of outreach where there's training, guidance, and resources for state leaders. And with that, I just wanted to recognize our leadership from the States and Affiliates Committee. So Jim Hodina is our SAC chair, and Steve Morford is our vice chair. And so I wanted to also thank them. They were also super helpful in helping us put this webinar together. And we actually had a little work group that formed from the States and Affiliates Committee. So this is the States and Affiliates Webinar Work Group. And so, like I said, what we wanted to do was kind of build like these actionable sessions that help state chapters learn about operations, grow their leadership, and also support their volunteers. So thank you everyone in the work group who you all put a lot of time and effort into putting this together. Steve Morford, Maureen Gramad, Adam Porth, Frank Delbonis, and Alan Cantor. And so tonight we're going to have two amazing speakers followed by Q&A at the end. Our topic for tonight is volunteer recruitment. And I think that's a challenge that we've all seen in state organizations. Finding board members when we're putting on events and programs and tournaments, finding those volunteers is key, and it's not always easy. And we actually decided to do this as our first webinar because we received so much feedback from state chapters. We actually sent out a survey to everyone. And this was the number one concern that they had. So we're excited to kind of tackle this issue and hope there's a lot of good information given tonight. So with that, we are super fortunate and very honored to have two of the most respected leaders in U.S. chess with us tonight. So I'm excited to introduce FM Suneel Warmantri, who doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give one anyway. Founding director of National Scholastic Chess Foundation, first chairman of U.S. Chess Committee on Chess and Education, co-chair of the Scholastic Council, longtime coach and mentor to generations of players, one of the most influential voices in scholastic and community chess. So thank you, Suneel, for being here. And our other speaker tonight is Frank Guadalupe. We didn't know this when we asked you, Frank, but you are the U.S. Chess Interim Executive Director, former U.S. Chess Director of Events. What haven't you done at U.S. Chess, Frank? Experienced international arbiter and organizer, former Tournament Director of the Year, You were the chair of the U.S. Chess FIDE Events Committee, and I don't know how many events that you've run, but there have been many, many events across the country. So I don't think we could ask for two better speakers to join us tonight. They have decades of experience building volunteer pipelines, supporting volunteers, sustaining long-term leadership. So please join me in welcoming them. Thank you so much for being here. And at this time, I will go ahead and turn it over to Suneel, who is going to talk to us about insights and strategies on recruiting and retaining board and committee members. So, Suneel, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Before I start, I just want to say I'm not sure I deserve all those accolades, but and actually I'm not sure, that I'm the right person, but I'll do my best. So I have not run a state affiliate or state chapter, as you know, but I've set up various organizations, and maybe I will go back to 91 when I ran the national elementary school championships at the Wright Town Hilton in White Plains. And the reason I want to bring that up first is that I knew that in order for that tournament to be successful, we needed a lot of local volunteers. And I estimated that we needed about 150 man hours of work, and that was all going to be volunteers. And so I had to recruit the volunteers for that tournament, and so you begin to think, where are you going to get those volunteers? Um, and I think that what I decided was that the first important thing is that there needs to be some kind of personal connection that the volunteer has to the activity or the organization. So where I turned to was the parents of kids in chess programs in White Plains, and I was able to to get the 150 man hours, and the tournament was pretty successful, I thought. So that's the first comment I want to make, is that if whatever the organization, whether it's state chapter or any other organization, the people you recruit as your volunteers and your board members should have some kind of personal connection to the activity or the organization. I think that's very important because that gives them buy-in to it. Um, so where do you find them? I think in the case of state chapters, you'll probably find the best volunteers at chess clubs around the state. Because people, if they are going to a club, that shows that they have some interest in the activity. And I think that those should be, that should be one of the first areas you look at, for recruits. Um, and in the second thing I would say is that in addition to having some kind of personal connection, you need to have a passion for the activity that you are looking at. And you should be able to communicate that passion to others. Um, and if you can do that, then I think that the quality of people that you get on as volunteers and as board members will be that much stronger. Um, and the third point is that you want people who not only have ideas, but you need people who are willing to do the grunt work, who will just roll up their sleeves and do the unglamorous jobs, because otherwise you're going to have an organization that, is full of ideas and nothing ever happens. So I would say, to summarize, those are three things that you look at when you try to recruit people as volunteers or as board members. Now, if you're recruiting as board members for, so the organization I had was a C3, and so it was also important to recruit people who would be willing to donate money down the line. Um, but that's not something that you ask right away. You have to get them involved, and then eventually find the right time to make the ask. But again, if you put people on who have no capability of giving to the organization in the future, then you're not going to get anything either. So that's something to keep in mind. But I don't think that really affects a state chapter, obviously, because you're not looking to raise money that way, but it would for a not-for-profit. Um, okay. Um, I'll give you a couple of anecdotes that, for example, let me use the volunteer apparatus that I have at Hunter, because that was set up over years, and now it just runs itself. Um, and this also ties in with the retention of people. So I will go into that as well. So in order, I think, to retain good people, you need to give them specific assignments. There is nothing worse than being on a board that where you don't do anything, and it's very frustrating. And people begin to feel it, and then after a while, they don't want to continue being on that board. So create some kind of activity. What I did at Hunter was like when we go to nationals every year. So there's so many areas that need work on. For example, one person can handle reserving hotels. Another person can look into travel. Another person can find out which kids need help financially. So you can create, uh, specific assignments within the organization, and then the person running the organization has to give those volunteers the freedom to act. I mean, you have to be able to delegate and let go, and let them do it. And only if they need help, then they'll come back to you. But I think that is very important, because then you feel that you have something that you can contribute. I remember one parent who was a pretty heavy duty Wall Street guy selling hot dogs in the you know at a hunter tournament, and I asked him. I said, "Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Well, he said, this is an opportunity for me to see." To experience firsthand what my son is getting, through this program, and so, I'm more than happy to be here selling hot dogs. So, so there has to be some kind of interest there. Um, and then it's very important to give these people the recognition that they deserve, because it's very easy to forget to recognize and thank people. And I think that one way you keep people is to recognize and thank them, and in whatever way that you find is appropriate. There may be different ways that you can do it for different organizations. Um, but in a nutshell, I would say, who you recruit depends on their interest in the activity. People never join things if they don't have any interest at all. I mean, John Rockefeller played chess with his grandfather. So there was a connection. He was the chess director in Maryland for his daughter's school and so forth. There always has to be some kind of interest there. So okay. I can go into more, but I don't think that. Um, I'll be happy to answer questions later. Let's just put it that way. Okay. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Suneel. That was super insightful. I just took tons of notes. And yeah, we'll definitely do questions at the end. So drop them in the chat or jot them down, and we'll do that once Frank is done with his presentation. So now we'll transition over to Frank, who I'm very happy to introduce, and he's going to be talking about volunteers, but in kind of the tournament director realm. So recruiting, supporting, and retaining tournament directors, which I know for everyone who are part of their state organizations, that's a really critical thing that we have to do. So Frank, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And by the way, did you get my email? with my attachments because I couldn't put them up.
Oh, I don't think I did.
Okay, well, it doesn't matter. I'll talk about it. I guess the topic that I was given was recruiting and supporting tournament directors. And of course, that's very near and dear to my heart. Um, First off, you have to make sure that the member either is a U.S. chess member, that is, the person, or else you know how to explain to him or her how to become one. That should be very easy. But as far as recruiting is concerned, uh, who will make a good or a TD that you can develop? Okay, well, uh, what I think is that first of all, you look at the players who you know will make a good TD, and then along with that is those who have expressed interest in becoming in TDing or becoming directors. Um, the parents and the co and the of players, those are good. You can get quite a few from there because that's the way many of us started, and I mean us because I was one of them. Um, Older siblings, friends or other family members of players, friends of friends who have expressed interest, as long as you know, of course, in tournament chess directing, and many others. But the point is that you have to ask. Uh, it doesn't come always very neatly packaged, if you will. You have to ask. And to that end, the other portion is that those who are TDs but are not that high level yet, you have to kind of balance the giving them all the answers and versus them going to the rule book or whatever and learning how to, what is my next step to become a local TD or a senior TD and so on. So you have to balance the two of them. And Michelle, I send you a couple of documents that has all the regulations and all that. But be that as it may, I'm talking to a group that probably knows what it takes to become a TD. I guess the most important part here is to identify them and then guide them accordingly. But first, that is the hardest part to identify them because many parents don't want to be TDs, but some do. And unless you mention it, they will never take that next step. And as I'm sure Peter Crane is here, many of them have talked to us and they have become TDs. Uh, a good TD is always aware of the rules and regulations involved, and she'll take advantage of available resources to gain experience. And by the resources, I mean the website, the US Chess website says contact TDs. Well, that's not quite true. You got to contact the organizers. You can contact TDs, and they say, hey, I'll put a good word for you with the organizer, who oftentimes is a TD, but not always. They don't have to be. So the person that will say, "Hey, what about in the next tournament or so on," or get some experience is that the actual organizer, who again oftentimes is a TD, but not always. Um, and then you should give them the opportunity. You got the opportunities yourself. We did. So we should pass it on. We should give the opportunity to others. Um, and then we have to keep them posted, either, or they need to learn, that is, to become familiar either by reading the rule book, which of course I always advise instead of just me giving the answers. Uh, or there are some websites, it used to be that the US Chess Forums was the Bible, if you will, to ask questions. Now with social media, for example, Facebook has numerous pages, that is, or sites that help the TDs and people ask questions and other more well-versed TDs answer and so on, such as the USCF TD Corner or the USCF Tournament Directors and Organizers or member of the US Chess Federation. So there are nowadays, we have more and more sites more ways to learn. And by all means, I will direct them or show them where they can find those. Obviously, in Facebook, it's very easy because all you have to do is search for it, and there you are. So not everybody uses social media, but most of us do. So that's what I recommend. Um, and then just get the experience at higher level TDs, and then pass that on to less experienced TDs, as I said. And then the organizer should give less experienced TDs the opportunity to work at tournaments. We often don't do that. We like to use the same people over and over and over again, and for good reasons. But on the other hand, we have to mix that with brand new people, and we should be able, or willing, that is, to give those less experienced but yet new TDs the opportunity to do the job, and that way they will learn and so on. We shouldn't take it personal. So that will be my advice on how to develop, how to meet these TDs, and so on. And to that point, the reason I mentioned Peter Craney earlier is because uh, Peter, I don't know how much he had done before he met me, but one thing I did was I gave Peter the opportunity to TD at my tournaments and so on. And today he made national tournament director. So I would like to call on Peter to say a few words. Peter?
Thanks, Frank. And thanks, Suneel, for your insights as well. Developing tournament directors is also something I'm very passionate about. And as Frank mentioned, you have to find the people that have the fundamental interest and the acuity to be able to succeed as a tournament director. So I know, working with parents at a lot of scholastic tournaments here in Houston, there are some parents I would never ask if they were interested because of their behavior in the tournament hall. There are others that I think are just waiting for somebody to ask them. And those are the ones you need to find. Case in point, at this past weekend, we had the Houston Open where Frank worked for me, which is an unusual experience to have the, the interim executive director report to me for a tournament. But I did give a chance to a new parent tournament director. She's a club, and I gave her the opportunity to come and spend some time on the floor and get some experience. The Houston Chess Association is very active with chess for scholastic tournaments. And if it wasn't for them and the opportunities they gave me, I probably never would have approached Frank and asked him for the opportunity to work for him. And knowing the people in your area that are active in the chess community is a way to find more people to engage. So you have to be open and communicative to everyone that you encounter. Now, some people you're going to filter out right away, like I said, people that demonstrate bad behavior or bad attitude, and others, they're just waiting for you to ask. And they'll step up and do things like collect score sheets at the end of a round, or help you post the pairings on the boards out in the hallways. And if you get them to do that, that shows that they're interested, and it demonstrates some of their competency as a clerk and the capability to become a tournament director. If you want to develop them, you need to recognize their contribution at every step. So thank them publicly. Let everybody know that they helped out with the tournament. Maybe before the awards presentation at the end, thank them. Have them stand up in the audience and give them a round of applause. Because a little bit of recognition goes a really long way in building their self-esteem and their sense of contribution. So I know I would not have arrived at the title of National Tournament Director if it wasn't for mentors like Frank and Jim Liptrap that I mentioned with the Houston Chess Association, and some other organizers and tournament directors that I've had the privilege of working with, both locally and on the national level. And Karen Pennock comes to mind as well. The first time I worked at a tournament, I worked in her section, and it was a middle school here in Texas, and I made a mistake. And if you're developing tournament directors, they're going to make mistakes. That's why we have appeals processes. And you can't, I felt so bad making that mistake at my first national tournament. I thought I'd never be invited back. And Karen said it would be okay. We had to go through the appeals process. And after it was all over, the chief for the event was Jeff Smith. And he came over to me and he said, we all make mistakes. I made at least 3 today. You're not alone. You'll get past it. Don't worry about it. We resolved it to everyone's satisfaction. So don't think that you owe us anything more than your honest effort. So if it wasn't for those words from Jeff and Karen, I probably would never have applied for another national event and never would have arrived at national tournament director. So recognize the people and keep them positively motivated. I think that's about all I'm going to say.
Okay. Thank you so much, Peter. Michelle, that's about all we have. Again, just recognize, identify what TDs or what parents or friends or siblings or whatever may be a good candidate for being a TD, and then you take your shot. Maybe they don't like it, and that is fine. But if they do, you have gained a lot. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Frank, and and Peter as well. I think that was so interesting to hear, Frank, your experience, and then to see how Peter kind of came up through the ranks after learning from you, and now he's giving advice as well. So that's pretty amazing. Yeah. So we have some time for Q&A. So drop your questions in the chat or unmute and raise your hand. This is a really unique opportunity to be able to ask Frank and Suneel questions. So I'll open up the floor. Don't be shy.
Chat is disabled.
We can hear you.
No, the chat. No, where you type in the messages.
Oh.
Did you try clicking? Did you click on everyone?
Yeah.
Oh,
I see Michelle.
Oh, okay. I see it. Okay.
And then Joshua. Yeah.
Okay. All good now. Sorry.
Adam, your hand is up.
Yeah, I have a question for anybody's experience on this. If you have individuals that are seemingly not getting along with, let's say, like a board of director that's not getting along with other board of directors, or TDs that aren't getting along with other TDs, you know, I've tried to keep people aboard by just keeping them separated somehow, but in the end, I've found that it was epic fail in trying to keep everybody on. Is there any advice or any? I mean, is it you just let them go? How would some of you guys' experiences be with that?
Let me try to tackle that, Adam.
Yeah.
So, you know, you couldn't possibly have a more diverse board than I have or that I had, because I'm technically retired from the National Scholastic Chess Foundation, because I have a die-hard Republican and a die-hard Democrat on it as well. So, you know, you just make sure you don't talk politics, but you let them be themselves. And, you know, the best lunches I've had are with those 2 board members and myself. And they've been shooting the breeze about anything. One is the former head of APAC, and the other is is a local Democratic organizer. So, they, you know, I think that you don't really have to keep them separated, you know, because that makes it artificial as well. You know, you want them to feel free to contribute. And I think that a lot there depends on who the who the head of the organization is, in terms of being able to keep people together, you know. So I don't know if that helps, but you know, I did have that experience of the 2 opposite extremes.
This is Mike Hoffpower from Virginia. Spent 9 years on the executive board and 6+ years on the 6+ years on the Scholastic Council before that. And I always viewed, quote, the person who's hard to get along with or the dissenter as they've got something valuable to say. You need to pick out the nugget from within that about what it is that they're trying to say. Because it's just because they're dissenting doesn't mean that you should just dismiss what they have. There's something in there that you need to pay attention to and try to figure out what that is and embrace it and not just, that's just Frank again being Frank. You just can't do that.
I will add, Mike, that just because people have different opinions about a subject doesn't mean they don't get along. So we have to be able to discern that. And okay, so you have this opinion, great. In fact, different opinions is actually what makes conversation more suitable for us to come out to a conclusion or solve an issue. Yes.
And hopefully, Frank, the activity will provide some general basis for unity, to get
Yeah.
people on the same page, because they are, whatever their personal views, right? They are interested in the activity, otherwise they wouldn't be, on the board or volunteering in the first place. So that's enough to work with.
Yes.
Jim, you had your hand up.
Yes. I was curious if Frank or Suneel or anyone have experience with providing more formal training, especially for beginning tournament directors or board members on a nonprofit.
Yeah, again, this is Mike Hoffpower. When I was on the executive board, I routinely did meetings for state chapters to introduce them to things that executive boards do in state chapters. So that's clearly something that can be done by serving executive board members or people who have been on the executive board before. I did it for the Louisiana Chess Association probably 4 or 5 consecutive years. Especially talking about fiduciary responsibilities, as parts of being an executive board member.
Yeah, let me add a couple of things. This is Suneel. I would say that whoever's in a position of leadership, what the weaknesses are or where they have not as much experience. So, for instance, the person who succeeded me as executive director of NSCF, I requested that he take a course in not-for-profit management through Cornell University, which he did. And, so that, you identify the areas where more help is needed, and then you address that.
Let's see. Suneel, Steve Morford had a question. Can you address the topic of diversity of skills when you're recruiting for a board?
Yeah, well, diversity of skills. I know what I don't want on the board. But, first of all, I think it's easy enough, when you'll always have the parent of the really interested kid volunteering to do something. And not all of them actually work out so well, because you have to have someone who is interested in the community as a whole and at large, and sometimes would even be willing to work against self-interest. And you find that out, soon enough. So those are the people you don't want, are the people who want to get on just to be an advocate for their particular offspring. So, you don't want that. In terms of diversity, I would say definitely have an educator on, because it gives a perspective that a lot of others don't have, and maybe gives you some inroads into the into the local education department as well. But so definitely an educator, definitely a financial person, and definitely an attorney. So those are three people that I would always make sure that the board has.
Any other questions? Actually, I'm just kind of going from that question. How do you handle, I think this maybe can happen with tournament directors and board members, but how do you handle like the egos? The TD.
Well, that's a problem with chess because after all, Michelle, you should know we all invented chess, right? Every one of us, we
Yeah.
invented it.
Like
Uh,
the board president who doesn't want to step off the board, or the tournament director who assumes that they're going to be invited to be the chief to every local tournament. How do you
well,
handle that?
the board president who doesn't want to step off, you create the position of
Mm.
chairman emeritus and you kick him upstairs. Right. So, no, either that or when they get on, you have your bylaws. So, you know that you can only serve for, I mean, just like US just now has term limits, you can only serve for a certain amount of time. So one way that I have handled it is to take like ex board members and put them on an advisory board. And that, that has kept a lot of people happy.
Yeah.
And Frank, the TD who just wants to do every single tournament.
The chief, really? I mean, that says that you are not the chief all the time?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
I wouldn't know. But anyways, no, yes, I haven't encountered a few like that. But even Peter Craney, I had in all our positions, and then now he's an NTD. So he's going to get, of course, I made him or I asked him to be the organizer of my events in Houston, and now he is. So, but no, nobody's guaranteed a position as long as you're not bypassing, for example, putting a senior TD in charge of an NTD. That doesn't make any sense to me. But that said, we should know better that, I mean, I haven't encountered any problems, that is, on that respect. They're there in that position that I give them or somebody else gives them, and that's it. I mean, I have worked with Mike of Power, remember that? Many years ago, we did a national elementary, I think, and we're in the same section, and Mike started yelling, "We want to play! We want to play!" And before that, all the
Mike
parents
did
fled.
that?
But you know what? I learned, in as much as I was higher than him, as far as TD is concerned, I learned that took care of the problem. Those parents got out of there quickly, so he knew how to do that, and that was very effective. So never underestimate somebody that does not have a certain level, whatever, because they may know something that you don't. So yes,
It still works.
it still works. I know. I use that once in a while too.
Mm-hmm.
I also have to say that sometimes it's just blind luck.
Well, that's
And
true. Yeah.
and what you say, like I remember, when Carol used to follow John around to tournaments, and finally, I think I said something silly on the 72 Fisher Spassky thing when I referred to some chess players as chess bums. And and Carol got all annoyed, and she
Oh,
said, "What do you
really?
mean they're just bums?" And that spurred her on to become a TD.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes.
I actually have a question for either one of you. I mean, I'm looking at and seeing who is on here. When my question would be, how young should you start recruiting for volunteers? Because I would think we want to go, or have shadows. So when somebody comes in as a volunteer, bring in a shadow at the same time so that they're learning together, or take an experienced somebody who's been in volunteer work for, I mean, for a very, very long time and bring along somebody who's younger, where do you find, or is that threshold that would be good? Do you recommend, for example, any people under the age of the legal age, what, 17 or 18, depending on your state? And of course, whatever the laws pertaining in those areas would dictate. What is your opinions on those? I would love to hear from either one of you, both of you.
Well, I mean, on TDs, you can be a TD as young as 13. You just need your parents' signature, and that's it. But they can do it at age 13 through 17. Once they are 18, they can just make that decision. But the point is that we do have a place for very, very young TDs, although I suspect that many chief TDs and organizers just don't want to use them. Oh my God, that kid is only 13 or 14 and he's going to tell others what to do. But he or she is learning. So I think that is fine. And that's what the regulations allow.
Mhm.
I'd
And
like
I
to,
will, I'm sorry.
I was going to comment on that as well. I
Yes,
think
go
there's a
ahead.
big advantage to having young people get involved with organizing and directing tournaments. They can take their passion back to their schools and then run it like a club with a ladder tournament or with a Swiss system tournament and build the discipline and structure that's common in organized tournaments outside their school. I think it will grow the chess community to have younger tournament directors involved. I have
Sure.
one right now that I'm working with my Friday night group.
And how old is he?
He's, I think he just turned 14 and he just
Wow.
became a club tournament director.
Good. Yes.
Now, because of that, if they are a minor, and of course, Frank, you did address the fact you do have to get the permission of the parent. Do you have to do that on an annual? Do you do that on an annual, or how does that work?
That's interesting. I think once the parents agree that he can be a senior director, unless they say otherwise,
That's not
you
quite
continue
true.
with that.
That's not quite true, Frank, because the safe play training, when you take the refresher, requires the parent's permission to take the refresher for the
Yes.
safe play training.
Every year? Okay.
Yes.
I usually talk to the parents anyway when they're dropping off their kid. I go, hey, don't forget this, or are they available next week to make sure they're all okay?
Mhm.
And on our
Mhm.
board of directors for CalChess, we actually have usually two or three spots open for what we call a scholastic representative. And usually these are high school kids. We invite them to our board meetings. And this also looks good on a college app. But then we can get their input as far as how they feel about what kind of chess tournaments we should be doing, what kind of things we should be doing for the scholastic community, which obviously is huge. And then just getting, then they like to be in doing, recruit them. I love recruiting younger players for being chess tournament directors. Even if they're just club directors, get them to take that safe play stuff and then boom, get them out there on the floor and just remind them how good this is for their college application. So get those high school kids out there, get them involved. My son Jordan is actually one of the youngest NTDs ever, one of the youngest NTD of the Year awards. So I recruited both of them now, and I'm actually spending more time supporting him than anything else. He does most of the work, and I just sit back. So yeah, get those high schoolers, remind them how good this can look on their college app. It separates them from everybody else of like, yeah, I was an assistant at the state championship. Okay, you may not be a chess master, but you can still be involved in the chess community. And, you can write them, letters of recommendation as well. I've done a whole bunch of those for a lot of kids. And so those high school, start grabbing those guys and bring them, and girls, bring them
Thank
all
you.
in.
That's a great comment, Tom. I've done that too. I've had seniors who need hours. In fact, some want to just teach, so I put them in a club, maybe in their town, start giving back, and they do an elementary program or middle school. But some want to be a TD, and they start by just helping us clean up the sets and so forth. And then we just, a great book I would recommend is Just Law. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. It's about $10. The USCF rule book can be quite cumbersome for some young people, but for my new TDs, I get them a copy of that. It's only $10, about 100 pages, and it pretty much lines out about 90% of the problems you might have. So at least they are aware of them, and that really helps with the training. But using young people is great. I've seen them also college kids work with them, and then they'll go back to there was one at Providence College here, and he went back to New Jersey, and he's running a club in New Jersey now, and where he lives. So you're growing chess when you're using young people.
I'd like to add something, if I may. So, yeah, on the question of how to identify those kids or people who would be good in that role, I think very often in high school chess clubs, it's not the strongest players who are the organizers of the club. There are people who organize the club who enjoy doing that kind of stuff, but they're never going to be one of your top line players. I mean, that's already an indication that they may be good, as a TD. And sometimes the kids themselves, they realize that maybe they are not going to become a super strong player, and they'll go the TD route. So, for example, New York has a very young NTD who's very highly respected, Sonny Yang, who went to 318, decided he wasn't going to be a really serious player, and decided to go the TD route, and now he's an NTD. So yeah, I think, but that's how I think that's where you look to find people.
I do have one other question because we're running short on time here. And that is corporate volunteer hours. So those that are employed with their company, how many are, if I may throw just that out to anybody and everybody, is that working in your areas for your state? Do you see that? Do you even see that? Because I feel like a lot of people have
Here in
neglected that
Virginia,
area.
at least here in Virginia, it's not as active as it used to be 10 years ago.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's a function of corporate budgeting or what it may be, but it's not as active as it was 18 years ago.
Okay. I didn't know if anybody is actually doing that, so that's why I threw that out there. Thank you.
Adam?
Yeah, I was just wanted to make it a little clearer from the chat. So if we have a minor that's interested in becoming a TD or working with your organization to be a TD, they can take safe play themselves, or do they need parent consent for that?
Then the consent.
They need consent, and so, like, for example, I've got a young lady that wants to work on being a TD. So her parents have told me that that's okay. Is that the only consent I need, or is there a form?
No, that when the parent has to fill out the form. Go ahead, Corey, you can tell them.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. So basically, what it is both the minor who is interested, basically how when we took our Safe Sport, you have to make a personal account to take your modules. For the way in which the Center for Safe Sport has it set up is the minor basically, the parent of the minor has to make an account, and then basically the parent will then create a minor account for the individual, and basically will authorize, through their account, are authorizing this minor under this account to take the modules. And that's how it's structured. So it's not just the person who's taking it setting up the account, but there has to be that parental account to then authorization and work with it. Not only, as Mike was mentioning, not only the first time, but then for each subsequent module training.
What does US Chess need for a minor to actually be a TD?
From
Other than
the
that,
US Chess perspective, as long as they have completed the Safe Sport training after going through the regulations of the Safe Sport, then it's the same as any other member.
Yeah, so
okay.
just satisfy the requirements for Club TD certification plus the safe play, and that's it.
Good, thank you.
I was just, can I top one real quick? Just another thing just about youth TDs, not only thinking about it from a college perspective or other things, it's also a great way to give them training on professionalism, on how to interact with not only players their own age in scholastic events, but also adults. One of the best assistant TDs I ever worked with was actually a 9-year-old girl. She was the daughter of the organizer in TD, and she had a couple of sisters, and all of them were players or TDs in some capacity. But by golly gosh, she ran one of the tightest ships as a tournament director I think I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And she loved it. And everybody respected her. Like, a lot of times you think, oh, they're teenagers, they're kids. Players won't respect them. If they conduct themselves as a professional, people had no problems respecting her authority. And that's something that, again, I felt was really beneficial to her to grow as an individual. And that's another angle to talk about. Players who may be on a defense of, I'm it's going to be weird, it's going to be difficult. It's like, no, it actually helps to give you that experience. So that's your sense.
Is there a track record for those that start so young and volunteer? No?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, the other thing too is that the Center for Safe Sport does offer safe play training for people under 13 years old, but that training is focused on teaching that kid what to recognize that is something that's being violated, as opposed to what you and I get when we go through the safe play training. So it's focused on the kid, sensitizing the kid to know when they're being sexually harassed or harassed in some kind of a way. So it's a different kind of safe play training altogether for the kids that are that age.
And we have a question in the chat. How do you recruit in smaller cities or less populated counties where no organizers seem to be present? US Chess does not share information about members that might live in these areas.
Well, I would say, Michelle, start a chess club. I mean, look, if you are going to run a state affiliate, you want to just make sure that there's chess in all parts of your state, right? So if there is an area that doesn't have an activity, that chess activity, then you almost need to create one, and then that'll just snowball and it'll work out from there.
Any other questions?
I would like to just piggyback on Suneel. Not only start a chess club, but I'm in South Carolina now, but I was the president for the Iowa State Chess Association. And when I was president, I would seek out and look for clubs. And, there would be a small college town, maybe 10,000 people, and found on Facebook that they were meeting. So I drove up there, went to their chess club meeting, introduced what our state chess association was and what we could do. And I ended up getting a couple people coming to our tournaments. And then now, who knows what they'll do next. And they've done really well. And I've had parents of that club, text me and say, hey, thanks. If you never came up, we would never have gotten involved.
Any other questions or comments before we wrap up?
Going back to what Sunil said, there's a quote attributed to Arthur Ashe. It says, do what you can with what you have where you are. And I think that applies well to starting chess communities in underpopulated areas.
Good point.